More explanations from Dr. Priscilla Njako, who's the manager, Buyer Power at the Competition Authority of Kenya. Thank you for joining us on The Explainer tonight.
Thank you.
So I know we've heard a little bit about abuse of buyer power, but this is really your forte at the Competition Authority. What is abuse of buyer power?
Now, abuse of buyer power is the exertion of influence by a powerful buyer. Now, of course, in any contract, there's going to be two parties, a buyer and a supplier in this context. And so you could have a situation where a buyer is in a position of influence so that they're able to push and extract terms of contract that, while highly beneficial to them, are equally highly detrimental to the supplier, the party on the other side. There could also be terms that are not quid pro quo. These are terms that entirely benefit the buyer. Let me give you an example. A situation where a buyer is able to demand that a supplier of a certain good or certain goods, remember the contract is for purposes of the supply of these goods, but the buyer is so powerful that they are able to force the supplier to also send employees to work on the buyer's premises. So it's an extraction of terms that would not otherwise occur, that are outside the normal course of business, and that reduce the price that the supplier gets to levels of below profitability and sometimes even below cost. And so that's buyer power and abuse of it. Now, abuse of buyer power, of course, there are certain conducts. I've given the one example of making demands that have nothing in return. Another example could be excessive discounts or rebates. Ideally, rebates actually are an offer from the supplier. And so the buyer has no business demanding of the same. They're an incentive from the supplier. Those are just a transfer of costs, transfer of risks, etc.
All right. Now, you know, you've talked about discounts. And so for many consumers, they'll be saying, but, you know, this doesn't benefit them. They want discounts when they go to a retail store. And perhaps that's what they've been benefiting from. And therefore, the Competition Authority's decision in this matter, you know, disadvantages consumers who obviously want, you know, large discounts when they go shopping.
Yvonne, I can assure you that I too love a good bargain. I love low prices. Of course, we are all bargain hunters. It only makes sense. But these apparent low prices offered by a retailer are actually short-term gain for long-term pain. Now, in this sense, one must ask themselves, typically, if I'm able to offer lower prices, it's because I am innovative, I am efficient, or I'm disruptive. I'm offering something different, something new that would draw you to my premises. But if I'm doing nothing differently from my competitors, you must ask, where am I getting this good prices from? And the reality may be that these apparent good prices are on the backs of suppliers. I'll give an example. A situation where a retailer, like in the present case that is at hand, demands that suppliers give free supplies, 2 cartons of per stock keeping unit of every product. And so when this retailer is opening a new store, they are bound to get new, free supplies, plus listing fees. 200,000 shillings in one of the cases we investigated, 50,000 shillings in the other for every new store.
What are listing fees, if you can?
Listing fees is a payment you make to be able to now supply at a new branch or even to a retailer. So absolutely, again, no quid pro quo. So 200,000 shillings, that's it. And so why wouldn't I be able to offer better prices? But the question is this: what is the effect on the supplier in the long term? And then even more importantly, most of suppliers are SMEs. SMEs carry the economy, 40% of the GDP. 85% of all new jobs created, 70% of all employment, indirectly and directly attributable to SMEs. And so in the long run, the economy suffers when these SMEs exit the market, loss of employment, etc. One other quick one is this. You could have a retailer that's able to exert and abuse buyer power. Now, those lower prices it's able to offer will enable it to acquire market share increasingly at the expense of competitors that do not engage in similar conduct. And in this market, that has been our experience. That's what we have found out. And in the long term, with reduced competitive pressure, then comes market power on the part of this retailer that can then operate independently. And those prices you've all been enjoying could go up.
Okay. 1.1 billion shillings is a hefty sum. Tell us two things, explain two things. One, how you arrive at such a figure. And some people saying, this is a big amount of money. Will this not sink the company? What happens if this retailer says, you know what? I mean, this is not their only market, right? This amount of money is too much. Let's leave the market altogether. And therefore, not just those two who'd made a complaint, but all retailers lose. I mean, we live in this country where we have seen several supermarket chains collapsing, and that leads to loss of jobs, including many of those suppliers who would then, lose an income. So is this amount too hefty? And, does this send the wrong signal to investors in the country?
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. That's a super question. Now, this amount is actually not hefty. It is proportionate. I think we are thinking that the thinking in some quarters, and gladly there are not that many, is that it's hefty because it is not what we have come to be used to. And the reality is that the authority's penalties are proportionate and appropriate. And there are a number of factors that the authority considers. Let me give just maybe three of them. There are a number of them in our finding and settlement guidelines. One of them is recidivism. Is this a repeat offender? Cooperation. Has this offender been cooperative? Have they been aware that this is actually an offense they're committing? And in this specific instance, I know you are aware that this is not the first time that the authority has had a clear conversation in the form of a penalty. Again, retaliatory measures taken against complaining parties. And in this case, that's what we found. And so we assess. And other than proportionality, of course, it's in the authority is keen on market players remaining in the market. And so, of course, there'll be considerations of sustainability of this market player. But even at the end of the day, compliance is absolutely important. And so this, I think also to point out that the reality is that penalties for anti-competitive practices are actually typically very deterrent. And the competition authority is actually on the lower scale. I'll just give you two quick examples. Very recently, in South Africa, the Standard Chartered Bank entered into a settlement, admitted liability, entered into a settlement with the Competition Commission of South Africa, and willingly paid 360 million shillings. That's about 42 million rands. And that's a consent. And look at that penalty. Okay. Again, and I will not even, don't let me move into the 4.34 billion euros penalized on Alphabet Inc., the parent company of Google, by the European Commission. So this is not hefty, proportionate, and deterrent, but still taking care of these market players.
All right.
Sustainability.
I have 2 minutes to go, but I really need to ask this question because this is 1.1 billion. We've previously reported just a few months ago, fines on steel makers, and it was in the hundreds of millions. Do these people whom you've penalized actually pay this money? And when they do, where does this money go? What do you do with it?
Okay. I'll keep it short because the simple answer is that they do. The steel enforcement you refer to in the steel sector, out of we investigated 14 companies. You only got to hear of 8 because those are the 8 we penalized, and a number of them have actually gone on appeal. But the remaining 6, 2 are in the process of settling. And the other 6, we're arriving at modalities of settlement of penalties. Where do the penalties go? The authority's budget is supported by the Exchequer, but there's a component of it that is A&A, appropriation in aid. And so that is where the collection goes to.
And
if there's a surplus, if there's a surplus, surrender to the National Treasury.
Okay, but then there is also refunds that you have made in your ruling that are supposed to be made to the suppliers.
Yes.
Okay, and these things happen in particularly those that are settled before it gets to a point like this?
They do, and that's on pain of a further penalty in this sense. Non-compliance with the competition's authorities' lawful orders is actually an offense.